Hi, everybody. Welcome to WatchTime Live. My name is Minda Larson, and I'm the event manager for WatchTime Magazine. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Welcome to WatchTime Live. I see so many familiar names here. We're so sorry that we're not seeing you all in person this year, but we decided to get started with these virtual events. This is our very first one. Certainly of this size. So welcome, we're so excited to be here with you guys. I just wanna go over a few quick notes on today. So after the presentation of the panelists and the watchmakers and creators, we will have some time for questions at the end. If you could please submit your questions through the Q&A button, which is on the bottom of your screen. So don't put it in the chat, type the question in the Q&A. And then we're going to be going through those questions and we'll select as many as we can. And then we will actually promote you to video. So please be aware of that. Please make sure that you're dressed and video ready. So we're going to promote you to video, and then you'll be able to ask your question live to all of the panelists. So just to say that again, please submit your questions via the Q&A. And if you have a specific question for Max or for Roland or for Kari, could you please let us know who the question is for? And then we'll select them. I will announce you, and then I'll promote you to video, and you'll be able to ask the question live. If you have any other questions or concerns, feel free to send me a note via the chat. If you can't hear me, or if you can't hear the panelists, or if something goes wrong, just let me know. But we're so excited to have you here. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jeff Kingston.
Hello, everybody. Greetings from Sun Valley, Idaho. And the Chambers Brothers music you heard was my special request. Thanks, Minda. This is really going to be fun. It's brand new for us. I'm delighted to have three of the greatest names in watchmaking with us as panelists today. This is really going to be very, very special. If you've read the announcement, and I'm sure you did because that's how you signed up, you know that we have Kari Voutilainen, Max Büsser, and Roland Murphy with us today on the panel. Just by way of very brief introduction, Kari has been independent, making his own watches since 2002. This comes after many years working at Parmigiani Fleurier, doing restorations and creating unique pieces. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Kari's work. He's won no fewer than 7 Grand Prix Geneva prizes, which is really extraordinary, and has developed a lot of very innovative movements. Kari is going to talk about his Van Week movement, and in particular about the escapement, which is quite innovative in what he's created. Max Büsser is the founder of MB&F, which he founded in 2005. And this follows a 14-year career, both at JLC and then 7 years at Harry Winston, when he created the famous Opus watches, which introduced us to lots of independent watchmakers, Journe, Greubold, Jean-Marc Wiederrecht, Uhrwerk. I mean, the list is fantastic. Vianney Alter. Lots of interesting things, but now at MB&F, Max is going to be talking about his legacy machine Perpetual, an extraordinary watch. It has also won a Geneva Prize, which adds to 3 others that Max has won at MB&F. Our third panelist is Roland Murphy of RGM, which he founded in 1992. Roland, I've introduced many times at WatchTime live event. No, live events for WatchTime. This is WatchTime Live, as America's great watchmaker. Roland has been making his own movements since 2007, and I think he can take credit for being really the only person in America to be doing serially produced high-grade watch movements. And Roland has brought back to life and revitalized lots of wonderful traditions from America's watchmaking past. And there were some great periods in American watchmaking, and Roland is keeping that alive. So really, without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn things over to Max Büsser of MB&F. Max?
Hello, everybody. Hi, Jeff. Thank you very much. So Jeff asked me today to talk about our legacy Perpetual. It's truly an incredible story. Actually, each of our 18 calibers developed in 15 years is an incredible story. 4 of them were with my friend Kari, who's with us today. The legacy Perpetual was created and developed with Stephen Mcdonald. Most people have never heard of Stephen. His story is this story. Stephen comes from Belfast. He's from Northern Ireland, and he's a theology scholar from Oxford. He did not study watchmaking. He was completely passionate about watchmaking, and he taught himself through books, through YouTube, through whatever he could find. And he basically one day decided that he was going to take a sabbatical and go and do a watchmaking course. So he came to Switzerland, did the short 6-month WOSTEP course, which is basically for beginners, and he aced it so easily that at the end of the 6 months, the WOSTEP asked him to become a professor. How did I meet Stephen is an incredible story also. I created an MB&F in 2005, was developing HM1, my very first caliber, with my friend Peter Speakmarin and Laurent Bess. And the company which was supposed to engineer that movement, craft all the parts and assemble all of them, got sold in 2006 overnight to a brand. That brand didn't buy that company to create calibers for third parties. There started a nightmare. On the 8th of January 2007, the owner of the company told me, "We're not going to assemble your movements." I was like, "What do you mean you're not going to assemble my movements?" My company in those days was just me in my flat. I'm an engineer, but trust me, you don't want me to assemble your movements. So I was actually groveling for the first and last time, I hope, of my life, saying, "Please, please, please assemble my movements." And that day, by an incredible chance, Peter Speakmarin was with me in that meeting. And after seeing me embarrass myself for way too long, he suddenly took my arm and in English said, "Let it go, we'll deal with it." I was like, how are we going to deal with this? There is no way I'm going to find any watchmaker where in 2007, pre-crisis, there is no, all the watchmakers are completely fully booked. And he said, "Look, we'll deal with it." We drove down 2 hours from that place. And during those 2 hours, Peter was on the phone calling up all his chums who were in the independent watchmakers. "My friend Max needs your help." Nobody had ever heard of me. They were like, "Who the hell is Max?" I said, "I don't care. You owe me. Let's meet in 10 days. 10 days later, we are in Peter's workshop, and there are 5 watchmakers. One of them I knew, 4 I'd never heard of. One of them is Stephen Mcdonald, who is their professor at WOSTEP. And we've got 5 kits of 350 components, where 50 are missing, but we don't know which ones. And we don't have the assembly plans of the movement. And we instruct each of them, and I'm smiling today, but I definitely was not smiling 13 years ago, that we have to start trying to assemble this movement. We don't have the plans. It's a massive jigsaw puzzle. We don't have the photo it's going to give. And they're all looking at him like, "You're joking, right?" He says, "No, because otherwise Max is going to go bankrupt." So it lasted weeks and weeks and weeks. And we would meet and people would go like, "Where does this go? What is this?" And very quickly, Stephen Mcdonald was going to actually take the lead. And very quickly, we saw that some parts were badly made. So I went back to the supplier who told me, "I don't care." So I was like, how am I going to redo these parts? And Stephen, in his little workshop at home, would work in the evenings at night to redo those parts. Keep a long story short, 5 months later, we managed to deliver the first 2 HM1s. And that was a week before I was going to sign for bankruptcy. So Stephen is one of the people who helped me save my company in 2007. Fast forward 4 years later, I bump into Peter Spiekmarin again at Basel Fair, who tells me, have you heard Stephen is in trouble? I said, oh, what's happened? Stephen has left his job as a professor, and he was actually working on a movement, his very first caliber he was developing for a brand. That brand got into financial trouble, couldn't pay him anymore. So he was all alone at home with 3 children, and he had no money coming in. So I took my car, he was living in those days in Neuchâtel. I took my car, went up to Neuchâtel and said to Stephen, how can I help you? I mean, you can assemble movements for us, but I mean, you're way too brilliant for that. And he looked at me and he said, I have an idea for a perpetual calendar. And I looked at him and I said, no way. We are never going to do a perpetual calendar at MB&F. They don't work. I mean, I'd been burned at Jaeger-LeCoultre. I'd been burned at Harry Winston. I call them boomerangs. They come out of the workshops, they come back into after-sales service. They come out of after-sales service, they come back into after-sales service. Why? Because they jam, because they jump when they shouldn't. And when all that does not happen, usually one of the owners presses the pusher when he shouldn't between 10 o'clock at night and 3 o'clock in the morning and jams and breaks his movement. And that's when Stephen looked at me and he said, that's normal because it's the way they're being constructed. I was like, yeah, we can probably work something different. It just doesn't make any sense. I said, what do you mean doesn't make sense? He said, look, most of these perpetual calendars are modules which are put on basic movements. A movement goes around in 31 days. And when you put a perpetual calendar module on it, 6 months out of 12, that module is going to tell the movement, don't do what you actually want to do. Meaning you want to go from 30 to 31. No. You're going to have to jump and go to 1. And that's where it makes it very sensitive. It doesn't make any sense. We should start with a movement which has 28 days. And all 12 months have got 28 days. And then we're going to construct something around it. You already had the word mechanical processor, which is going to actually send the movement where it should. Maybe we could get to the next slide. So here is the movement. It didn't happen overnight. That's all Stephen could tell me. And I said, well, did you have any plans? He said, no. So I said, okay, you know what? We're going to bankroll you for a year. And if after 12 months, it doesn't make any sense, you're going to have to find another solution. And if it does, we'll continue. Again, a long story, which I'm going to shorten. 3.5 years later, Stephen Mcdonald single-handedly, with the help of our team, but single-handedly engineered a 581 component movement, which is a triple revolution in the history of watchmaking. So let's go a little bit into the story of that. First of all, after 3 months, he comes back to me and he says, do you really want that flying balance wheel? And of course, the flying balance wheel is the story of the legacy machines. I said, yes, of course. He says, because there's so many parts I have to put just underneath, I can't put the escapement. So I look at him and say, so that's the end of the story, isn't it? He said, no, maybe we can put it somewhere else. I mean, what do you mean? How can we separate the escapement from the balance wheel? He says, I don't know, let's try. Again, because Stephen never went to formal training, and I'm not saying formal training is bad, he keeps on challenging what exists because he learned by challenging. And he basically said, well, maybe we could put the escapement behind and the balance wheel on top. It's like, there's 11.7 millimeters between the balance wheel and the escapement. So the first thing we did with Stephen is test if something like that could actually happen. You've seen the size of that balance wheel. The shafts on which they turn is 0.2 of a millimeter. The balance wheel is 14 millimeters. Well, guess what? We managed to make it work. So that was the first amazing revolution. But much, much more importantly was the mechanical process. And I'll show you a little film then afterwards how it works. I'll maybe ask you to next slide. So there you see the top and the bottom. One of the very important factors of this development for Stephen and for all of us at MB&F is not only that we see that balance wheel that we all love, because I'm a bit of a balance wheel fetishist, it's that we could see the whole complication itself. It's virtually impossible to have a skeletonized perpetual calendar. Why? Because most traditional perpetual calendars have got the grand levier, the grand lever in the middle, which don't make it possible. So you have some sapphire glasses like AP, which show you the parts, but actually where you can actually see everything, it's very complicated. And here we wanted to do everything in 3 dimensions, and that's actually what he managed. If you look at the back, actually there is the escapement, in front is the balance wheel. Here it's a double barrel movement with 72 hours power reserve. The oscillations are 18,000. All our legacy machines are very slow beat for 2 reasons. A, because it's a tribute to the 19th century and therefore makes the life of the watchmaker much more difficult, because you need a great watchmaker to regulate it. But also, more importantly, because it's so beautiful to see something moving slower than the high beat we're used to. At the back, you're going to see these are levels that we learned thanks to Kari, levels of finishing. This is, of course, all hand beveled, hand anglais, in interior angles, beautiful rose gold chatonnais, the hand engravings, the hand polishing of every wheel. This is artisanal watchmaking at its highest. But let's try and understand the mechanical processor Stephen actually invented. So let's go to the next slide and do the little film. So here we are. This is the movement as you see it. I'm going to extract from it the perpetual calendar part. This is one of the major innovations. The part in the middle is the mechanical processor. We're going to isolate it. Here it is. This is what Stephen invented. This contraption actually has got 4 positions with the pin 28, 29, 30, and 31. It is programmed with rates. The programming takes place on every 25th of the month and pushes that little pin to the position it needs to be. How is it programmed? From a cam, which is on the months. You can see that the big holes are 31 days. The smaller holes are 30 days. And of course, you've got the terrible February, which has got 2 separate systems, one for the 28th and on leap years with an epicycloidal cam on 29 days. So you can see large hole 31, small hole 30. So here we are. We've programmed on the 25th of the month. This is January. What's going to happen? The watch continues 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. What's going to happen at 31? One of the main reasons of blockages is when you push forward. So Stephen did a flyback system where at 31, it flies back to 1. That's why we could also put that dot between the 31 and the 1 for all the perpetual calendar fetishes. Now we're on February. 25th of the month is programmed to the first position, the pin. So it knows 28th, it flies back. Fast advance, we'll see what happens on a leap year. So the indicator we're seeing with 3 black dots and white dot, the white dot is leap year. Continues on the 25th of the month. Boom, it knows it has to push to 29 and it will fly back. Next slide, please. So this incredible system, which has never been used in watchmaking, was invented by Stephen and engineered by him. And for the first time in our history, when we assembled the 581 components of the first movement prototype, you know what happened? It worked. And I've met so many incredibly talented people in this industry over the last 30 years. Stephen is the only person I actually give the word genius. The guy thinks in a completely different way. There's another revolution he brought, and it's a simple one. And I hit my head against the wall thinking, why did I never think of that? Many perpetual calendars, as we said, are actually damaged by the owner himself because he pushes at a moment where he shouldn't do the correction. You can see that here, we haven't put correctors, we put little pushers, which you can actually activate by hand very easily. Because Stephen put a clutch, a mechanical clutch, on every pusher. And at any sensitive time, when you should not be changing the date, you press your pusher, nothing's going to happen. So you're going, why is it not working? I'm wearing it here. Why is it not working? Because the clutches have opened up. You change the time, the clutches will close. You can do your correction. We craft. It was launched in 2015. We craft 30 to 35 movements a year. So over 5 years, it's been a bit more than about 160 movements, 160 pieces. In 5 years, we have not received one piece back in after-sales service for any calendar issue. We've had a few other issues, I will admit, but they were not on the perpetual calendar. That's a tribute to Stephen's idea. So you can love it because it's beautiful. I'm sorry, I find it beautiful, but it actually works. And so we've crafted 30, 35 movements every year. They're limited editions, virtually every one of them. I'm showing the ones which are more or less available. There was the titanium piece, which I'm wearing with the green dial. There were 50 pieces crafted. I think there are like 2 left at retail stores. There is on the other side, the yellow gold piece, which we introduced beginning of this year, was it? Yes, this year already. There's a limited edition of 25, and I believe there are 3 left. And then the piece in the middle is the non-limited version, which is the white gold version. We do 12 pieces a year, so 1 piece a month. And there, it's a waiting list, and you wait till you can get one. Voila. I could go on for hours, but I've got all our friends to speak. It's been an incredible story. I can never be more grateful to Stephen Mcdonald. And the great news is that we're working on something else with him now, which you will be seeing, if everything goes well, end of next year. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you very much. That was just fantastic. And as the owner of a boomerang watch, I had one come back from a very famous Geneva brand 9 times. That could be a world record. Anyway, I'm now delighted to introduce Roland Murphy. Roland?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm pleased to be here. I want to thank WatchTime. Looking at America's great watchmaking past has inspired us to do many things here at RGM, and I like bringing that forward. So we get many inspirations, and we find a lot of these things because as a collector, as a watchmaker, as someone who has repaired and restored many antique and vintage watches, I learn a lot from that. And the other watchmakers here also do. And we still do that work here today. And that's benefited us a lot. Our caliber 801, which you see here on the right, the bridge shapes were inspired by the Edward Howard, the Keystone Howard model called the Edward Howard. And this was the flagship model for them in the early part of the 20th century. And I've always liked how those bridges kind of flowed, and it's a very classic look. So that was the inspiration for the shape of our 801 bridges. The 801 is really the first movement since 1969 that's been made in a series here in the United States. So we were very pleased to be able to bring that back, bring watchmaking back on a small scale, but still bring true movement making back to the United States here. If you can bring up the next slide. On our next slide here, what we have is we're showing a patent drawing you'll see here on the one side. And this was the inspiration for our winding click. The Illinois Alini and the Hamilton Grade 400 were basically the same movement. Hamilton bought Illinois in 1927 and continued with that movement. It has a very unusual little click there, which gives us a nice recoil when you get to full wind, which will then take that pressure off of the mainspring, but it's also quite beautiful to watch it function. So this was an inspiration that we applied to our caliber 801. And so it's little things like that we've taken note of over the years. The next slide I'd like to show is here's our Model 222 Railroad. The Model 222 Railroad is a special watch. It doesn't have a movement that we manufacture. It actually has a vintage 10 size Hamilton pocket watch movement. These were small dress pocket watch movements. And we had our Model 222 first, which was sort of more of a conventional watch. And then the 222 Railroad here, we came out with a couple years ago. And we wanted to be able to keep that orientation of 12 to the second. So we decided to turn the watch, which makes it quite easy to read. You might notice that Vacheron, Longines also have brought that forward from some transitional watches that we saw back in the teens and the 20s when companies were really converting watches or transitioning watches from pocket watches to wrist watches. And they were able to utilize some cases the same case, the same dial, the same movement by turning it. But it makes something quite different looking. But here on the Railroad model, what we did is we brought forward the Boxcar Dial. So the Boxcar Dial was a Railroad design dial. There are several types of Railroad dials from that time. But we liked the Boxcar. It was very classic. It was introduced first in 1925 by the Ball Watch Company, but it was also used by Waltham, Hamilton, Elgin, all with slight variations. So we brought a very authentic recreation of the Boxcar Dial in the hands here. And of course, we don't like to mimic anything at RGM, so we don't like to make something look like something the way it used to be done. So the dial is also a Grand Fure real fired glass enamel dial. We don't want to take something that used to be enamel and do a painted white dial. That, to me, that's sort of faking it. So we've never wanted to do that. We are working on a new version for the 222 Railroad. This version will still be available, but we're going to add to the collection by adding another Railroad dial. So over the next several years, you'll see a few more different Railroad dials that we'll be bringing forward in the Model 222. So it's been a very successful model for it. It's quite different than anything on the market. So people really do sort of find a fascination for it. But it is one of those watches where you either love it or you don't. There's no real in between. We can bring up the next slide. Here on the left, you see it's a Keystone Watch Company. Our Keystone Watch Company first came around in Lancaster County here, where it's exactly where we are here in Pennsylvania, in 1886. Now, not all of their watches had a Keystone on the hands, but you'll notice on the end of the hour and minute hand, there is a small Keystone on those gold hands. We brought this idea forward. Some people wonder, well, what is a Keystone or what is that shape? Well, a Keystone is the state symbol for Pennsylvania. And just a brief definition of Keystone, it's a central stone at the summit of an arch, locking the whole together. Or it could be the central principle or part of a policy, a system on which all else depends. So that is the motto really for Pennsylvania. It's the Keystone State. So we wanted to, I was fascinated. I found these hands actually. I have a few original sets. When I went to Bowman Technical School in the 1980s for clockmaking and watchmaking, there were still a lot of old parts and things in this area you could find. And I was able to buy some old parts, and I found a few original sets of the Keystone hands, and I kept those. And then some many years later, when we were working on some new models for our Caliber 801, I thought, what better thing to bring forward than to remake the Keystone hands. Of course, we've made them a little bit larger, a little bit different. We changed the shape, but brought that idea forward. And another thing I like about it is no one else has hands like this. So it's unique to us. So we have a beautiful blued steel hands, but with this a Keystone shape. And again, it is something that a lot of our customers really like. But if for some reason they don't, we also have the classic Breguet hands. So you're not stuck with the Keystone hands if you don't like them. But they have actually been more popular than the Breguet hands for us. So that's an idea that we brought forward from the 1800s, from the Keystone Watch Company. We can bring up the next slide. So here what we're looking at is the motor barrel. Now we brought the motor barrel back. A motor barrel hadn't been made in a watch since the late 1950s, early 1960s. And we were the first to bring this back. We first introduced it on our Caliber 20, which you'll see on the right-hand side there. And we've also since offered as an option on our Caliber 801. And there were essentially two basic types of motor barrels. Most people are familiar with the original version, which was really intended to protect the movement if the mainspring broke. And that's the more common version. But the type of motor barrel that we decided to use was used mainly by Hamilton and Illinois Watch Company in those teens, 20s, into the 30s, and also even into the 40s. And then in the 10 size watches, all the way up into the early 1960s. The motor barrel system is quite different. If you're familiar with watches at all, and the mainspring barrel, normally the arbor, the shaft, also has the hook on it. It's all one piece, and that's what's winding the watch. So if you jewel that, essentially, if you jewel the bridge and the plate, what's happening is those jewels are functional when you're winding the watch. But when the watch is running, those jewels are not really doing anything other than holding everything in place. The type of motor barrel we have is essentially the part of the arbor that has the pivots on it that ride in the jewels is fixed to the barrel. So now the barrel and that arbor become one piece. And then we have a separate part of the arbor that slides over that has the hook then that will be used to wind the mainspring. So the benefit here is that when the watch is running, those jewels now are functional. So now the barrel is essentially jeweled while the watch is running, like all the other wheels in the wheel train. So this reduces friction, it reduces wear. It is more interesting. We have a beauty. You can see the jewel on top of the ratchet wheel. So it is something that you can visually immediately see that this watch has a motor barrel if you know what to look for. This system works really well. We've modeled it after that Hamilton, Illinois system. Of course, we've redesigned it to suit our watch, but it's working really well. We were proud to bring that idea forward. You can also see a somewhat similar system in that Elgin original drawing there on the left from the Veritas movement. So the motor barrel is something that we were proud to really bring forward. The Hamilton 950 was famous for having the motor barrel. The Illinois Bun Special, if you know anything about pocket watches, was another, just to name a few. So that's something else that we have brought forward from America's great watchmaking past. And we're always looking to do that with watches. So as we repair and restore things as part of our business, we're always looking for ideas. And it's often from America's great watchmaking past, but occasionally we will also look at any kind of watches. We actually, our hacking second device, which is an option on the 801, was actually an idea that we saw on an old Laco German World War II watch, and the system worked nicely because we needed the setting system was quite far from the balance wheel. And we were restoring one of these watches, and we saw how they were able to bring everything over and through the movement. We thought that's an idea that we could apply, and we use that. But so we're always looking to learn from the past, and that has benefited us greatly. So I'll turn this back over to Jeff, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here today.
Roland, that was just fantastic, and it's wonderful, in particular, to see that there were some great American watchmaking traditions, and it's fantastic that you can bring them back now. So we move on to Kari, and Kari, you're going to talk to us about the natural escapement that you have put into your Van Tweet movement. Kari, you need to unmute.
Yeah, so here we go. Now it's better. So welcome. Thank you so much. I mean, greetings from Switzerland, from Val de Travers. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about our movement and our escapement. So I was involved with them, first of all, with this natural escapement, which was invented by Breguet in, that was early 90s. And it was a pocket watch tourbillon which had that escapement, and I was blown away about the beauty of the simplicity of the escapement, but also the performance what it gave. But that was perhaps a little bit like hazard, because Breguet had problems at that time, and that was not the construction, but the problem was rather the technical facilities at that time, because they didn't have tools to measure, they didn't have hard metal cutters and so on. So they had other problems. But when I started as an independent, I did put some goals on my career, and one was the independence. And there's two independences: financial independence, but it's also the liberty of the creation. And that liberty of the creation for me was that I'm doing by myself, and then I'm free to do what I want. And when I'm doing by myself, I can set up the quality and the level of the finish and as I wish. And I've been working toward this goal all my career. And about 2011, we started to do the construction of our own in-house movement. 2008, and it took almost 3 years. And I was thinking that once we do the movement, we really have to do something special, and also to do the escapement that we are able to do by ourselves. As Swiss Libre escapement, we can, but it's not really easy to do with the conventional machines. we need a spark erosion, or we need stamping machines, or we need machines made to be able to do the fork and the escape wheel. And if we want to do the high end, so we should have machines to polish the teeth and so on. And like for us, it was impossible. So I was thinking that this natural escapement, the idea to use that direct impulse, it's great because we can, the geometry of the escapement and the escape wheels and the lever which is in the middle, which is holding the wheels during oscillation, can be done with our machines. So we can use traditional machines. So we are milling and drilling, and we are able to do that. Perhaps we can have a next slide. So we have been doing different calibers. We have quite a lot, more than 10 or 15 different calibers. Every single time when we do a new watch or new mechanism or new function, it's always a new caliber. I don't do modules at all. So every single time we do the new movement, the new main plate, and the mechanism is inside of the main plate. And like this slide shows, the watch which has again our movement, but it's reversed. It's done in the way that the movement side is on top. We can see the movement from the top, and on the back we have an indication for the power reserve and as well the small seconds. Then also the geometry or the architecture of the watch or the movement comes from my experience from the past, that we have been doing I've been doing restorations, and I like movements which are solid. Our movements, they're not thin, so they are, I would say, that sort of solid constructions, that they are real screws and pieces are strong. Yes, we can see the next slide. So we have our escapement, which is done in the way that it has two escape wheels, which are on the same gear train. So now we see only the escape wheels, but they are connected with another wheels, which are we call driving wheels, and it gives the impulse in two directions, which is benefit for the run of the watch. Then the impulse, the action between the escape wheel and the balance wheel and the impulse roller is exactly like on the chronometer escapement. It could run without oil if we do escape wheel from cold. But in these dimensions, in my opinion, it's too dangerous, because the tip of the escape wheel teeth, it's only something like 0.12 large, so it's very thin. That's why we are using steel wheel, which is heat treated, and we do bluing of the wheel afterwards for the aesthetical reasons, that we can see the wheel. If it's polished, it disappears. We can't really see the wheel. And then we have a safety device exactly in the same way as we have on the Swiss lever escapement. And then we have a locking device, which is on the fork. So we have a special jewel on that. Perhaps we can see the next slide. So here we can see the configuration of the wheels, how we find them in the watch. That we have a fourth wheel, then we have a second wheel which makes one rotation in 1 minute, and then these two escape wheels, and then we have a balance wheel. The balance wheel, it's very large. It's a free sprung. It's made from copper beryllium, and we are using gold timing weights to do the timing of the watch. Perhaps the next slide. So here we can see the fork. So the fork doesn't keep the impulse. The fork does only hold the wheels during the oscillation, and it's the balance wheel, when it's coming, when it's moving, it comes on the fork of the pallet, and the jewel is turning the pallet. It's releasing the power, the gear train, and the teeth is giving the impulse. Pallet is moving, and then the escape wheel on the other side is getting against the locking face. The locking jewel, what we can see here, it has a weird shape, and that weird shape is done because we need the angle of the draw, which means that in case of the shock, the pallet is always pulled against the banking. So it means that the functional part, it doesn't touch the safety roller. So that yellow part is, we call it in English guard pin, and that guard pin, the tip of the guard pin doesn't touch the safety roller. So it doesn't disturb the run of the watch. So it's very different escapement comparing the traditional Swiss lever escapement, but it gives a different performance. Perhaps you can see the last slide. And then the small story that when we were doing our watch, so we were doing, we are making all the parts for our watches. We do all the main brake bridges, screws, pins, everything. And this jewel we were willing to find somebody who could do the jewel for us. But end of the day, we didn't find anybody. We were asking all the jewel makers what we could find all over the world, from Switzerland to Germany to China, Hong Kong, Russia, Japan. And it was only a Japanese company who was willing to do, and we were thinking that it's a bit far away anyway. And we decided to start to make our own jewels. So we are buying a Ebauche, which is 120 long, 0.40 profile. And then we are milling all the corners and angles by ourselves. So it was a long way to learn, but today we are able to do that sort of things in our workshop. So I think that's what I all want to say, and I thank you for attention.
Kari, that's fantastic, and I learned something I didn't know. I didn't know you were milling that special jewel yourself. That I don't know anybody else in Switzerland who is doing that. That's fantastic. So thank you to all three of our panel members, and I think now we are set to open things up for questions. Minda, are you going to take charge of the questions?
Yes, I am. Is Patrick Karcher, are you here, Patrick?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. What's your question, Patrick?
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the event. It was a pleasure to listen to and to see Max, Kari. One question I have is, are many collectors worried about long-term customer service availability for independent brands, or is that specific, or like, is that different for independent brands that worry versus for established brands? The very long-term availability of the customer service.
Okay, which one of you guys wants to jump into that one? Or Max, you got your hand up first.
I'll take the first part. Kari will finish the second part. It's of course a question we get a lot, and it's completely coherent. If you're buying from a big brand, you can sort of suppose that they're going to be around the next 50 to 100 years, and it's completely right. I think all of us, at least I can speak about myself, one of the things which keeps me up at night is making sure that this company survives me. It's part of a lot of things that we're introducing into the company. One of the many actions we've taken is that every single one of our movements, and it's going to seem weird, is made only of steel and brass. No technological materials, no silicon. I'm not saying silicon is bad, don't get me on that one. I'm just saying only steel and brass. And in 100 years, a great engineer or a mechanic and a watchmaker will be able to remake any part like Kari used to make when he was in the Parmigiani workshops, when he was remaking parts for old 200-year-old pocket watches. That's the first thing. Second thing is, of course, I'm doing everything I can so this brand continues. If something happens to me, and I won't go into that. But the third is, if everything we've done, if something happens to me, doesn't work out, I have given strict orders to my team that if after I've gone, for whatever reason, the company cannot continue, the last thing they will do is put all the plans of every single part of every single caliber online and open source, so that anybody who's got the talent can remake the part. But I can't ensure more than that.
Thank you, Max.
Yeah, Kari, did you want to say a couple of words?
Mike, Kari.
So that's definitely correct and right what Max told. And then also it's, as we are working, we can't work as a hobby makers. So we have all the plans, all the files to be able to do the parts in case we need them. So we have all the fabrication plans, we have all the assembling plans. So when we are looking at is it an industrial company or us, we have to be very precise. And it's without that, we are not able to do parts today, but we won't be able to do them in the future either. So it's important to be correct when we are fabricating, and it starts from that. And then we have to remember that Zapek, when they started Patek Philippe, he was alone, and they have been growing. For instance, Ourier, the famous chronometer maker, he's not here today anymore, and his company was gone. He was the only one. He doesn't have a family succeeding, but his chronometers are still repaired today. So it's not a problem when it's a classical watchmaking. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Kari.
Minda, our next question.
Our next question comes from John Price.
Well, again, I'd like to reiterate what our last questionnaire mentioned. I appreciate you putting this together. Some of us aren't always able to travel to these WatchTime events, so I really appreciate this. But my question is for Mr. Büsser. You know, I've seen recently your collaboration that you have done with H. Moser and see, and those are just beautiful watches, just stunning. Well, all your watches are, I have to admit. But I was just wondering if in the future, do you have any plans for any other collaborations like that, if you can talk about them or not?
Thank you very much. When I started MB&F, there was a lot of anger in me. And it was all about creating my own pieces. And it was about me, 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 and me. And luckily, I got over it, not completely yet. And I started understanding that if I gave one of my pieces to somebody I admire, and who's got a different style, different philosophy, different whatever, we could actually create a child together, which they would never have done alone, and I would never have done alone. And that's the beginning of these collaborations. We call them performance art. So we started in 2009 with Alain Silberstein, 11 years ago, on the HM2. It's something I love doing. It's about finding the right creator. It can be an artist, a designer, a watchmaker, you name it. As long as they bring something different to the table that we love, we mix, and our child is born of both our DNAs. So yes, of course, there will be more. There won't be, because we've had a lot of questions on the Moser, are you going to do other colors and things like, no. It was difficult to resist because there was such demand. But if we do it, it has to be a one-time only. This is not a business. This is not a commercial thing. It's one time, we did 60 pieces, that's it. I'm not telling you that in 4 or 5 years down the road, we wouldn't do something again with Moser, but it would be something completely different, like we did with Alain Silberstein on HM2, and then with LM1 7 years later.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Minda, the next question.
Our next question is Paul Bragan. Are you there, Paul?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Of course, thank you so much to WatchTime for putting this together. Thank you, Kari. Thank you, Roland. Thank you, Max. My question is to Max, actually about the legacy machines in general. When you first decided that MB&F was going to make round watches, who's the first person you told, and what was their reaction?
When I set up MB&F in 2005, amongst the many things I'd said I would never do was a round watch. That was for all the others. And I said I was very angry. I wanted to create my 3D kinetic art pieces. I would show my horological machines. And I said I would never, ever do a round watch again. And Legacy Machine 1 started its life as a horological machine. What it actually started off as was the beginning of my balance wheel fetishism. I designed a watch which was cylinders. And one cylinder had the balance wheel, one cylinder had the hours and minutes, and one had the power reserve. And with my good friend Eric Giroux, the great independent designer, I've designed everything, we were sketching and trying to do something. And whatever we did looked one way or another to that one piece unique that Vianney Halter did for Gold File in 2001, which was also 3 cylinders. Of course, it didn't have the balance wheel in it. Whatever we did, we're like, no, there's something reminiscent of that. So we kept on doing iterations until one day I went bonkers in a meeting. I said, forget about all this. You know what? let's try and do just let's do a tribute to the great master watchmakers of 19th century. Let's do like an old pocket watch with a flying balance wheel. I did the sketch of exactly what LM1 became. That was a tough meeting. Eric, who's a dear friend, and I've been working with him for 20 years now, who's the best man at my wedding, stormed out of that meeting saying, because he'd been working for like 8 months doing all these different iterations of HMs, and I'm suddenly doing a round watch. It's like, he said, I don't see the point of this, and he got out. Serge, my technical director, who's also my partner in the company, looked at me very respectfully and said, I didn't join MB&F. And so actually it was the biggest battle I had to do internally. But now I'm going to tell you a story which involves our friend Kari. Because once that was done, and so we went to see Jean-François Maujon, because in those days our company was very, very small. We didn't have engineers in-house. We got 3 fully fledged engineers. We did virtually all our movements in-house. I went to see Jean-François Maujon. I gave him the design, the idea. He said, oh, it's possible. I said, but I have a dream, is working with Kari. And of course, Kari I'd known for many years, and I love his work, absolutely love it. And so Jean-François, Serge, our technical director, myself, went up to meet Kari in his workshops. And we sat down around his little table and said, well, Kari, I've got a new project. It's not a crazy machine. It's a round piece. It's classical. It's a tribute. I would love to have you working on it. And he looked at me and very politely said, I would love to work with you, but I've just got too much work. I can't work with this. And Kari can tell you after if I'm exaggerating. And so I was like, oh. And so I said, okay, well, I took out the design and showed it to him and said, well, what sort of pointers can you give me? And then he started looking at it and he started, oh, you could do this and that, and oh, amazing. And Kari, you were speaking like by yourself for about 3 minutes, and he lifts his head up and we're all looking at him, and I look at him and I said, Kari, does that mean you're going to do it? And he looked at me he cracked up a big smile and he said, this I'm going to do. And this is how we started working together, and it was one of the greatest days of my life. And I'm happy to be able to say it in front of Kari. It's been an incredible, 12 years ago, we sat down for that project, and we've created 4 pieces together since. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Minda, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, we actually have 2 more questions. So next is Geir Andreasen. If you could unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Hi, Geir, what's your question?
No, I have 2 questions really, but first of all, I'm honored to be here and actually talking to you guys. Fantastic. So I'm in the beginning of starting up my own little brand here, but I'm wondering, when you started out as independent watchmakers, how did you sell your first watch? I guess that's an interesting story for all of you, both Maximilian, Roland, and Kari.
Roland, can you answer that first?
How did I sell my first watch? Well, I've been doing this a long time. It's not easy, especially if you're not known. So you just have to be really persistent. I think there's more advantages here today than when I started as far as getting it known. You've got social media, you've got internet, you have blogs, you have so many resources now that I didn't have. So for me, it was really just trying to put out a few ads and call a few people that I knew, and really I sold because I had already been doing a lot of repair and restoration work and work like that. I sold my first pieces actually to some of my customers who I'd been doing restorations for, but it took a long time to really build into something, but things are quite different now, so I think the possibilities are broader.
If I can pitch in, am I pitching in?
Yes, pitch in, Max.
Yeah, it's incredibly complicated, but as Roland said, it's much more complicated now and much easier. It's much more complicated because retailers, when I started off 15 years ago, retailers were still very much willing to take risks. Now, very few are ready to take risks. So I was very lucky that 6 of them believed in what I was doing, and they actually, because I didn't know any consumers, they introduced the first consumers to me and started that way. But we, as Roland said, we didn't have social media, we didn't have all of that. Today, I think you've got an incredible opportunity because the world of watch amateurs is hungry for new creators, if it's a quality product, of course. All of us, and I don't mean any disrespect, are getting old. We're all over 50 years old. The youngest, and the exception being Recep, who's like our Wunderkind, the youngest is we're all in our 50s and over, and we've all been doing this for 20 years, if not 30 or 40. And I think there is an incredible appetite. And you see, like, there's this young watchmaker, very talented, Remy Kool's, who got the Journe Prize, who's now coming out with his new watch. And the world is talking about it. It's a cool piece, it's a really well-made piece, but there is a hunger in the media and the social media for new creators. So if you created an innovative, creative, quality product, I think there's an incredible avenue on social media to help you.
If I could just jump in with one other thought, which is all of us owe you guys a great debt because you have brought credibility, desirability, information, knowledge to the whole idea of independent watchmaking. I mean, it's taken decades to do it, but you've done it. And without you guys, if somebody just popped up on the scene now, they could have all the social media known to man. And it wouldn't work, I think.
So we have time for just one more brief question. And then after that, we have a lot of requests, please, that we'd like to have a wrist check. And we'd like all of the watch creators to show us what they're wearing. But we have one more question, and that is from Gravil Ibrahim.
Hello guys, hello everyone. Wow, this is actually a very big thing for me. You guys are really amazing, and what I'm hearing and seeing here is just out of this world. I'm actually from South Africa, a little town called Worcester. Qualified in watchmaking, very proud of that. I studied in Italy and Switzerland between 2015 to 2017. And at the moment, I'm actually, say 3 years almost, a watchmaker. And I'm working on watches like Patek Philippe, Rolex, Audemars Piguet. And my passion is actually boiling inside of me to just get out of where I am. I'm talking to you guys personally because what I'm seeing here is exactly what I would want to do. And my question for you guys, and thank you, Munda, for this opportunity, and all of you guys, is what would you say is the future for our small watchmakers, which is actually me and the people that I do know, who has a lot of passion and would want to work like you guys do and create something or just work on those amazing watches and not have these type of watches in I would say circumstances that I can see there's no passion there because of what I'm working on. And I can go on and on about this, but I wouldn't want to clear out names or the company that I work for or anything about that. But what is the future for a guy like me who has this passion and would want to grow in this industry? And just even if I don't make a name for myself, but just to work on your watches and have that love, because when I was in school, I created one from scratch, from parts that was lying there in a box, and I named that watch. So I understood then that is watchmaking. It's not about wearing that big watch that is a lot of rands or dollars worth, but to give a watch life. That is watchmaking for me, and I fell in love with it. And I really would just like a nice opinion, or just what do you guys think? What is the future for the small watchmakers starting out?
Thank you so much. Who would like to take, I think Kari wants to take this. Kari, I'm unmuting you. Kari, unmute yourself. There you go.
So, you know, my story is, I'm coming from Finland, from northern part of the Finland, which is, you know, when the Santa Claus is, so there's nothing to do with the watchmaking, but it has been my passion. Since I was young, I wanted to work with my hands and so on. And then life goes on, that I've been watchmaking school, and then I wanted to learn more. So passion drives me to come to Switzerland to learn more. And then passion drives me to work during the evenings and nights to make restorations and repairs, earn some money and save money and buy tools and buy tools. But nothing happens in one night. So I finished my watchmaking education in 1986. And since that, I've been working towards the goal that in one day I will make my watches. But it takes a lot of time, and nothing happens like with a computer work. You press enter and it's finished. But it takes time, and then today perhaps young people, they have forgotten that working with a computer and you press enter, the work is done. But our work is, you need a lot of passion, and you need years and years. But it comes. But it's also to have a philosophy that what you want to do, that you don't go on the side tracks, that you are doing what you want to do. But I think it's a passion is one thing. And when the passion is driving you, then you will, in my opinion, we will get much more success instead of thinking money. Money doesn't bring success necessarily. You do wrong decisions perhaps, and you do decisions in a short term, not a long-term decision. That's a long-term decision which are important. So that's my small advice.
Could I chime in here a little bit?
Yes.
I would just like to say that, you know, I feel privileged to just be able to make a living at what I love doing. I mean, that is a success, whether I'm known or making watches. I started out in repair and restoration, and I love that. I still do repair and restoration work on certain pieces to this day because I enjoy that. And I don't know what the opportunities are in South Africa, but if you are passionate and you're a talented watchmaker and you're able to make a decent living at doing what you love, I mean, that's success. You don't have to be a worldwide known watchmaker to have success. So I think just doing what you love is something that you should look forward to and be happy with.
So thank you everybody for your questions. That was a really beautiful ending for today. If Roland, could you start and show us your watch, and then Max, and then Kari, and then.
I didn't put on the most famous piece, but this is a fairly, this is our Model 500 GMT automatic that we did with, in collaboration with Richard Sachs, the well-known bicycle frame builder. Richard and I have done, this is the second collaboration that we did. He's built handmade bikes, very well known in specialty cycling. So that's a great, it's sort of an everyday, I do wildlife photography and things like that, so I can take it out and beat it up and enjoy it.
Okay, my turn, I believe. I am wearing our Stephen Mcdonald's Perpetual Calendar in titanium. I haven't left this watch for the better part of 2 years. I actually, interestingly enough, I usually wear our prototypes. I love this watch so much that I actually, and I should probably say that, I made a number 0 for myself. And so there's a limited edition of 50, but there's actually a 51st, which is on my wrist, and it's not going to leave it. And I love it, of course, visually, the story I gave you guys, and it's so light because it's in titanium that it's actually super comfortable. Slowly with years, I tend to shy away from heavy watches, which was something we used to like a lot, but I've got a very small wrist, and I just love, I love this piece.
Kari.
Yeah, so I have this piece what we did present this year. It's a Van Tweed, but it's with the center seconds. So it's a bit different, smaller case, 38 millimeter and 30.5 titanium case, and we can't really see, but it's a quite sparkling white engine dial. And the aesthetic, I mean, visual is a bit different comparing what we are used to see on our wrist. But it's easy to wear, nice.
So thank you everybody so much for joining us. This was our first webinar for 2020. Like I said, we miss seeing all of you in person so much. We hope that we can see you in person next year, but this was a really great alternative. So thank you so much to our panelists, Kari, Max, and Roland, and to Jeff for helping moderate this. This is me in the WatchTime office, by the way. So coming to you live from New York City, we miss you guys, and we will see you all very soon. Thanks very much.